So without further ado, I will start with introducing Anup Nandra, who is blockchain global leader at Amazon. He's a co-founder, chairman at Trusted IoT Alliance. And to a little bit of feedback, the Trusted IoT Alliance is the world leader in standards for verifiable information for IoT devices. So super thrilled to have you. Next is Mitch Tseng, and chair of Testbed Council of Innovation. And we're actually doing something with IIC. So thank you, Mitch, for being here. Just a little bit about the TAS group. It's founded by AT&T, Cisco, GE, IBM, Intel, all those great companies who are really looking to visualize a different world maybe. So I'm definitely looking into your insights. And we have Robert Parker, co-founder of Bright.AI. So that's a really excellent company for everybody to look. He also is a former CTO of SmartThings at Samsung, and which is a division of something that leads the smart home field, from smart doors, lighting and sound systems, kitchen appliances. So really anything IoT related, it seems. So really great. Then we have Mitchell Kaminsky, director at CTA. And it's a lot, really, I think formerly U.S. Department of Transportation Associate Director. This is very interesting. We'd like to get some insights on, that angle of the world. But as well on CTA is they're creators of Consumer Electronics Show. Some of you have heard of it. In fact, UCAM at IoTeX has won one of the awards. So it's just thrilled to have you on the panel and share your insights. And last but not least, of course, Jing Sun, co-founder and head of investments at IoTeX. And she's a founding partner of Sparkline Capital, has lots of investments. And yeah, well, let's kick this off. So maybe everybody, if I didn't introduce you correctly, feel free to add something, about yourself. Maybe say hi. We'll start with Robert.
With that intro, how can anyone follow up? But I'm really excited to be part of this. One of the things that everyone has talked about, and I think is really important, is as you see a wave of technology being adopted, like 3.0. Everyone's going to have a different opinion, and it's great to have an opportunity to hear from people different angles, because it's going to evolve differently from how everyone thinks anyway. It's going to evolve in response to the adoption. I think the thing that we all believe is adoption is happening. We're already seeing it. But in that, I just wanted to say, this is a great opportunity to see a bunch of different perspectives, because it is going to be an evolution. And it's going to go differently than any expert predicts, which I'm sure everybody already knew.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you, Robert. And Anup, maybe you can give us a few words about Amazon, AWS in their vision and your vision.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for thanks for having us on the panel. I'm really looking forward to the conversation, and just to echo Robert's points, right? Like, we come from very different perspectives. Just one quick correction though. We actually merged Trusted IoT Alliance with IIC a couple of years ago. We said, let's bring these two worlds together and do something even bigger, more powerful, right? Wow. Together. So that was a couple of years ago. But at AWS, one of the things that we're really keen on, and kind of the strategy that I'm driving is, and I think you guys hit it up really, really squarely in your intro, right? Is the whole notion of identity. Back at Trusted IoT Alliance, we did some of the early work in this space, like working with Bosch to actually get, an electric Jaguar. Well, how do you express an identity for an electric vehicle, right? And how does that identity interact with other objects that may or may not be on the same network, right? And so, now that we've got kind of KYD, your device, now the question then becomes well, what about your applications, right? Where is the efficacy in the applications? And so, these are kinds of questions that, we probably wouldn't have known to ask had we not done the experiments, right? And now that we've done the experiments, we've got, now a path forward to really double down and explore, what is actual identity. And I will say I'm really excited about MachineFi. I'm really upset that I missed the NFT drop. But, we will move forward. I'll pause there.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anup. That sounds great. And let's maybe Mitch Tseng, you do a quick intro for us next, and Dr. Incredible, of course.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my name is Mitch Tseng. I'm a consultant. I'm also the chair for the Marketing and Innovation Task Group in IIC, and also I'm heading the Testbed Council and the Edge Computing Task Groups. Well, the Dr. Incredible is mainly because I have some of those crazy ideas, and then anybody in IIC, when they have some problem, some issues, they come to me. I can always provide a satisfactory answers to them. So that's why they gave me this title. Having said that, I was lucky enough because I start from the communication background. I got my training is in the digital signal processing. I got a PhD on that. I'm the inventor of this two second order Fourier transform time domain and frequency domain. I don't want to bother you or bore you with that details, but I have been working with Nortel and then Nokia for many years, and then about 10 or 11 years ago, I started paying attention to this new sector called machine-to-machine communications, and later on the whole thing grew bigger and then become this IoT, right, Internet of Things. Then with that, I've been active in the IIC, and then my focus has been like how to turn this IoT, make it a big successful business. For example, we started with the commercial IoT, right? And so like many years ago when people start talking about IoT devices, and there's some prediction about the billions and billions of devices, right? But then after our observation is that there are a lot of devices, but then if you just have a device that connected to the app, to the apps in a cell phone, that's not IoT, right? Because there's really no good business model for that one. For example, like if you're a device manufacturer, if you focus on that one, then you'll be in danger because you're in trouble, because typically the IoT devices are not very complicated. So like it will be easily, once you got a great idea and you put it on the market, the knockoff can be there in the next month. So that's really nothing to protect you. Mm. So with that, we kind of go into this industry IoT or industry IoT. That's where you have IIoT, and IIC is a foundation for that. At least that we can focus on the vertical domains, right? Healthcare, right? And then autonomous driving, smart manufacturing, smart city, whatever you want to call it. Then when you go to these verticals, you have focus and you have services. Then you have business associated with that. So even though the taker of these verticals are kind of slow today, but then part of that is because this financial investment to changing from the brownfield to greenfield, that can be kind of pretty challenging. But we are working on those parts because our motto in the Marketing and Innovation Task Group is we want to get you rich. Right? So, yeah, and, we are very close to that. Okay, be honest with you, right? But maybe like 90% now. So once we can jump over the 10% hurdle, then once I become rich, I won't forget you.
That's right. With IoTeX, it's the same idea. We're gonna make everyone involved busy, connect devices, and unlock the growth and riches for everyone. So we'll go next to Mitchell Kaminsky. Mitchell, please give us maybe a little bit of your vision, your experience.
Yeah, I'm not Dr. Incredible here. So I don't know how I even follow you, Mitch. A great name, by the way. But joking aside, Art, thank you for inviting me, and very excited to participate in this conversation. As you mentioned, my name is Mitchell Kominsky. I lead self-driving vehicle, smart city, and transportation efforts for Consumer Technology Association, known as CTA, which of course is the producer of CES, which we'll certainly dive into and share more about what we're seeing. I've had a number of different angles from this ecosystem. So I've been an entrepreneur who has built a smart city startup that was helping to deploy various types of IoT projects, from connectivity rings to automated vehicles and sensors and infrastructure and roads and various likes. And I've also been a part of the IEEE standards body for smart city development. So it's a very interesting area, right? Because there's so much adoption, but there's lots of technical challenges and interesting areas of, right, if you break down consumer, enterprise, as I think you just spoke about, and then also from a government perspective. And kind of in that vein, another part of my experience, I've served on Capitol Hill for committee and leadership where I focused on emerging technology policy, and was also at the U.S. Department of Transportation working on connected and autonomous vehicles and advising the secretary. And the one note I think be interesting, and I'm happy to, I think is a good part of this conversation, is the typical gap between policy and policymakers and technology. That's something that I think we can all agree has, and not surprisingly, been the trend. Now with Web3, how will that be impacted by it? You have lawmakers who are using crypto wallets themselves, purchasing NFTs, are involved in that process. But there's a complicated ecosystem, and that creates a vacuum, right, for in a way lots of opportunity, but then there's lots of people in this space who I think will and have called for regulatory frameworks and structure. So and then just a little bit about CTA. Our members are the leading innovators, from startups, which are 80% of our membership, to global brands, and working really across the American job ecosystem, who are building the future of IoT and Web3. So I'm sure we'll get into a lot more of this, but very excited to dig into this and appreciate you having me.
Absolutely, and fantastic introduction. Thank you for joining us. It's we're always trying to uncover something next page. What is next? And I think this is great. Jing, maybe give us a quick intro to yourself as well. Please welcome Jing Sun.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, even this is just a brief introduction of everyone. I already hear a lot of thoughts from everyone. I cannot wait, for this amazing kind of conversation. Hi, my name is Jing. I'm one of the founding members of IoTeX. I'm a VC turned entrepreneur. I have to say, I never seen so many innovations happen in single space in the web, like in the Web3. So my job here is actually, we help build a foundation. This foundation will be, focus on how to connect all the machines and devices into the Web3 world, and also help how to kind of accelerate this innovation process for all the builders, all the manufacturers, who are maybe they are right now they are doing the Web2 things, but how we can help them to accelerate the process into the Web3. And we already see a lot of amazing use cases. I heard Mitch talking about the community-driven economy, and comparing to the commercial-driven. Actually, we see a lot of the innovations are already starting in that area, and we see many use cases. But I think the conversation here will be more focused on, hey, what's going on, with our current status, right? And why, Web3 matters. We need to kind of understand the why, and then we understand how. And then just like, the possibilities, opportunities will unlock this, just like Art, talk about this, $12 trillion, kind of value, how we can unlock them, by 2030. I think this will be a lot of interesting conversations during this panel.
Absolutely, and we're gonna right into that conversation. So the next panel actually going to be the new internet bringing Web 2 to Web 3, and I mean that's this panel. So let's get right into it. So we'll see. I will throw kind of a general first a bit of a setting expectations. So McKinsey said that we're going to have 100 billion smart devices by 2030. And 50 billion by 2027, another report said. So the bottom line is there are going to be a lot of smart devices, billions and billions and billions. And how do we connect it? How do we understand how the landscape is changing? So I'm going to throw it out. The question is, how has the smart device landscape changed over the years? And maybe Mitch from IC, you can start with that, and then we can kind of roll down if anybody else want to tackle that as well. So so I will, please.
Thanks, Art. That's $1 billion question we're talking about. Yeah, because we heard about this since the starting point of machine-to-machine communications. At that time, it's about like the beginning of the 2020s, right? And then we're talking about Ericsson made a bold argument, say there will be 53 billion devices by 2027, and now we're talking about maybe 100 billion devices by 2030, right? But then we have a lot of people following the traditional or conventional industry. They start thinking about, okay, I can make these wonderful devices, and then people will start using it. Then all the devices, as long as they have some CPU on it, they call it smart devices, right? So the term of smart devices has been abused in my view, right? But the thing is that what the people hasn't, for those device builders, they immediately found themselves in a hard time, because I mentioned in my opening remark, the IoT devices, no matter how you call it smart devices, it's not that difficult to have somebody to come up with a better idea and then have some better design to overcome your stuff in a very short time. So that means if you have something to design, if you design something over there, and then you probably the whole device become obsolete in 3 to 6 months. So yes, I believe that we will have 53 billion devices by 2027. But the question is that how many of them actually are sitting on the shelves and gathering dust today, right? There's something. And the element that lacking is actually the service element behind that, right? So when you have a device that you could put on your wristband, and then as a wristband, and then you can kind of communicate it with your iPhone or your other smartphones, then can keep track of your health, or your exercise, the data. That people say, okay, there's a smart device, there's IoT, but no, it's not. That's what we call the commercial IoT. And the commercial IoT does lack of this service element to that, because it's a small scale. And worst of all, it does not have a financial means, right, to reward the contributions, right? That's something that I think is very important, because we don't do things for charity, right? We build something and then we spend our efforts, we want to cash in on that one. So that's why when we get into the IoT demand, the industry IoT is better because it's focused. When I need a device, it will be a smart device, because I want to do that like PLCs and whatever other controllers or other sensors. I want it because there's a purpose for that, right? So those those companies that are focusing on this specialized device maybe fate a little bit better. However, they are also facing challenges, because IoT business, especially in IoT, is highly centralized, highly focused, and also a lot of things are customized. That means the volume of the devices you make is not going to be billions of billions. You'll be lucky if you can get 20,000 of that, and then people actually use them all. So then how do we overcome this kind of trend? In IIC, what we try to do is that we start focusing on the services. So we have this cycle from when you try to provide a service, you have ideation. You're gonna come up with a great idea. I want to do this to help in the smart manufacturing facilities, right? So then we say, okay, proof of concepts. We could just go to the outside and shop around and see what kind of devices are available, right? Then we will use it as a proof of concept, and then furthermore, we found that once we build it, it's not. We cannot just draw a line there, because several years back, if you have a company, then you have a thermostat with a Wi-Fi capability, then you can get somebody to invest $240 million on you. Those heydays are gone, right? So like right now, you really need to have something that is workable, and also you need to prove your value. That's the next step we talk about. That's POV, proof of value. And then after that, we thought that would be great. But the problem is that when the technical directors and the product managers talk to us, they got excited about this solution. When they presented to their company, the decision maker, the person who signed a PO, may or may not easily understand what you're talking about. So this proof of acceptance will be the next phase. The next phase that we're going in IIC, we're pushing for that right now. We try to develop means when you do the business development, everything needs to be included so that the whole cycle from one end to the other can be connected and it can be completed. But then I was lucky that I have a chance to talk to Roland and Larry in the Long Beach last week, which we have an IIC Q4 meeting over there. Then when we have a lot of discussions and a lot of bar talks over there, and then one thing I discovered is that this community IoT economy, right? Community IoT economy that with this like a machine file and those things can support us. That actually can help us resolve a problem. That is we have this a lot of people in the just provide a lot of contributions in the virtual world, and also like a software domain. And then we have some other people that are actually in the physical domain. And right now we're talking about using the digital twin to connect that. But when we use a digital twin, we have a lot of issues. For example, like a data integrity. How do I trust those information being passed along? And those things can be a showstopper for us. So what we are looking into right now is that is there a way we can actually provide a very secure environment so that all the data, all the transactions inside can be trusted. So after the talk with Roland and Larry, I'm convinced that this may be up to something for this machine file. And in 2022, in ISE, we will start looking into this part.
Excellent. So, yeah. No, that's fantastic. And thank you. And yeah, machine file will be bringing solutions to a lot of problems. That's our vision. And thank you for the vision. So, and next, I would like to ask Mitchell Kaminsky. Tell us a little bit about the big problem right now. Is dominated by big tech. So how do we deal with it? How do we avoid this issue where it's how do small companies and device manufacturers fit into today's landscape? And that's IoT domination by big companies is one, but can they do something?
That's a great question, Art. And I would say start with at CES this year in just a few weeks. We expect 1,900 exhibitors from 160 countries represented. And I think the major point there is that the majority of that is coming from small businesses and startups. And so I think it's important to really start, diving into that question by mentioning the technological advancements and computing power has increased dramatically in the last number of years, which has helped in a lot of categories. And with AI, edge computing, blockchain, and other emerging technologies that we're already seeing, we do see a lot of smaller companies entering and continuing to grow in this space, candidly. And so for the consumer, the device, as you all know, has become smaller, faster, and more useful. And I think that will continue exponentially, right? I mean, there is certainly debate about Moore's law, if it's still in effect. But I think what we could all agree about is that computing power is going to continue to increase. And that's going to come from, yes, of course, the larger companies. But I think there'll be a lot of innovation in the startup ecosystem. And that is what we are seeing. And so consumers have also adopted IoT devices, making this market very exciting from a range of companies, right? Not just the research reports that we see. There's going to be, X billion amount of devices. We already see this in the market. So, and I think a couple of, items that, just already demonstrate how pervasive, how consumers feel about this is around 118 million people in the US right now engage in some form of voice search activity, at least monthly. IoT devices are everywhere, from smartwatches, voice assistants, and shaping really the way we talk and work and engage with each other in lots of different ways. And approximately 69% of households in the United States have at least one smart device, while 12% or so have about $22 million homes have several smart home devices. So, 5 to 6 years ago, this was not even close to what we're talking about now. And I think really the discussion here is about Web3 and, the potential of unlocking, so many interesting applications for IoT. And I think CES 2022 we're going to be featuring a prolific lineups of startups in blockchain and IoT and other interesting other industries that I think really the key here is convergence, and will continue to do so. And one area that we see is digital health, where that industry is really becoming a focal point of CES and of IoT devices. And I think it's really exciting to think, what could Web3, for instance, how could that impact these types of advices and improve our health? There really is a lot of potential there. And as I think Mitch just spoke about, industry automation is more important than ever. And yes, there are huge players, and those are a lot of those companies are members of CTA, but we're also seeing a lot of opportunities for innovation. So for in smart cities, if you're thinking about building automation, in 2020, it grew by 42% with connected lighting devices, and we expect that to continue. We also, I think, briefly touched on autonomous vehicles, which is an area that I'm highly focused on. And that also, interestingly enough, part of this conversation is that where does some of this IoT and the deployment of it depend on other areas and AVs, right? It's the government and regulations or laws that are enabling deployment. There are other areas too, I think this will apply. And so, if we're looking at the benefits, from CTA's perspective, I mean, they're enormous. Users can share the data that has not been tampered with, that's been added, depending on the blockchain, right? For Web3, users can limit access to sensitive information, create greater efficiencies with data, and blocking transactions too. So a lot of companies are looking at this, and just to name a few, we have Athena, Cryptulip, Bystamp, Devio, and Blima. And so we have really a strong presence of small companies and startups that will be at CES and presenting this type of projects. And of course, we also have Block Party, Coinbase, Atomic Form, because I think the ecosystem is big. And a couple of points to round this out. It just NFTs, right? How does that fit into IoT devices? There's surely applications for this that can be done in interesting ways, and I'm really excited to see what our companies and are going to be innovating in this sector. And also with cloud services, right? And we have AWS here, right? Anoop, which I'm sure you can get into, but at a high level, thinking about cloud for Web3, right? That's a tremendous opportunity. And I'll finish at the laws surrounding Web3, as I briefly touched on, are still in process. So one, I would say to this community that you want to be proactive in shaping that, because though the policymakers will listen to you, they are interested in this, and they are creating this roadmap now. So you have this unique opportunity to really be a vocal part of shaping how the industry is going to look. And for instance, the Board of Governors for the Federal Reserve, FDIC, and the OCC, the Comptroller of the Currency, Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, they announced a roadmap for their plans to study Web3 markets and craft regulations, but they have not announced anything yet. So, I think there's this there's a way sometimes with innovators and small companies about just being focused on the product. But what I would suggest here from that this should be in part baked into your product or embedded, because that you could, some of these items could influence, unlock new potential areas, or it could block them. So, I think that's a really important point for communities that are forming DAOs, especially right in governance and all these sort of things. So it's, I think, a huge area that is not always thought about, because building is the most important thing in the community, but building for application I think is really crucial. So
excellent. Absolutely. Yeah, it's building, and that's what IoTeX has been so good at. It's specifically building. They're been building for 4 years, and now the audience finding out that, oh, you've been developing all this for many years, and now it's coming to fruition. So it's and that actually takes us to the next question, which, by the way, perfect for Anoop. So Anoop, I'll throw you right in here. So this question is, we've been throwing Web 1, 2, 3, 5, 7. Let's define what is Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3. By the way, there's no 7, guys. Spoiler alert. So what is? Can you break it down for us? What is Web 1, Web 2, Web 3? What is there? Are we starting to, Web 2 sparked innovation, but is it starting to hit its limits? And what's your thoughts on kind of how would you define Web 1, Web 2, Web 3 transition?
Yeah, it's a great question. And in my mind, I think the real North Star is Web Infinity, but that's a separate discussion. I look at Web 1 as kind of really coming from, the mind of, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, right? The idea that in the early days an AOL could exist, and in AOL you could go to, an online destination and read stuff, right? You could get informed. So we saw a lot of walled garden content being created, and that changed the way people thought about, how does information get distributed, right? Now, that was really interesting. I mean, there was a lot of money made. There were a lot of companies. I used to work at Nortel as well. We were big in that space. And what was really interesting is that, there was no notion or consideration around security back then, right? Like, how did you actually protect? How did you actually protect not only the infrastructure but the content that you were creating? And how did you manage distribution of that content? I mean, we were all living in a walled garden operating environment back then, and I think that's what, to a degree helped. But when people started realizing that they could be contributors, I think we started thinking about what security might mean. And then we look at notions around compliance and accountability and the automation of all of that. I mean, that was not even being considered of back in Web 1 days, right? And then we kind of made that transition to Web 2, right? The idea that anybody could now be a producer of content, right? And we're seeing the emergence, more than the emergence, we're seeing, a definitive creator economy and creator industry being created, right? I think that's really exciting because, one, it breaks the mold of, well, you can only consume content from walled gardens, right? And so now I can go off and create any digital destination of my choice, produce any kind of content that I want, build any kind of business that I want in that environment, and it's all happy days. But I think one of the challenges that still exists is, and we see it time and time again, is there are challenges around security, right? And as we look at now, with the amount of automation that exists, right, from infrastructure to applications to data sets, what is the efficacy of all of that? I think we still have some big questions on how do we actually guarantee efficacy in an environment where data can be manipulated, while it's in storage or while it's en route, right? And so that creates problems. But I also think that there are opportunities there that Web3 as a technology kind of mindset really addresses, right? So the idea that not only am I a creator or a producer of something, but now I can also programmatically control the distribution and monetization of that. That's really powerful, right? And now that I can control the distribution and monetization of that, I mean, to me as a networking and infrastructure guy, that looks like a policy, right? That's like a network policy. And so how do we now create these environments where the policy is what we are actually trying to deliver some regimented process and integrity around, right? And I think that's where the innovation of smart contracts is one of those pivotal innovations that is just as impactful as the original HTTP. Right?
Absolutely.
And so when we look at this now we've got mechanisms where we can not only hold ourselves accountable in this operating environment, we can hold others accountable in this environment. And we don't have to be constantly checking in on people, right? The idea that there is now this environment that is, at Cisco, we had this program we were creating called continuous cryptographic compliance, right? And it applies across the board, whether you're in the healthcare industry, whether you're in the media and entertainment space, or whether you're just trying to collect data off of a bunch of IoT devices and trying to make a business decision on? Like, how do you guarantee and measure the efficacy and therefore the compliance of that? And how do we kind of remove, or not really remove, but change the mindset of root cause analysis? Because in a Web3 environment, your root cause analysis is continually executing, right? You're continually testing and validating and verifying every transaction, every event that might occur on the network, right? And so your digital forensics, which is classically an after the fact event that occurs in a classical Web 2 environment, is now perpetual. It's always running, right? And so I think when we kind of unlearn some of the things that we've created in the Web 2 space, and really think about true automation at scale, powered by smart contracts, where there is efficacy, where there is accountability and compliance that is continuous and run and real time. That's when we can see some real true value being unlocked, right? And so we're starting to see that with NFTs, right? NFTs are effectively an encapsulated business process, right? The idea that this digital data object that is immutable and is robust and resilient is really in control of itself, right? And that creates opportunities, right? So, the way I look at this as we went from Web 1, no real notion of strong identity, no real notion of strong security. We went to Web 2. We started thinking about identity. We started thinking about how these identities now interact with the broader, and unlocking the broader creator community, right? Producer community, like whether you're producing documents or videos or what have you. And now to Web 3, where we're actually truly encapsulating value, and we can actually generate entirely new business models that weren't possible in Web 2 and weren't even thought of in Web 1, right? Yep. So, when I look at this, I say, Web 3 is going to evolve at least 5 or 6 times over the next 10 years, right? Just like any other technology. But I think we, as a community of practitioners and experts in this space, do need to set ourselves to a fairly high standard, because one of the things that's going to be really important is if we cannot prove efficacy, right? Which means that we've got infrastructure and applications and resources that do KYC, they do KYD, they do KYA, right? Customer, device, application, right? We need a more rigorous, a much more rigorous identity framework to unlock, even MachineFi, right?
Absolutely.
So I think these are things that are really important. So I'll pause there.
Yeah, it's absolutely that. Unlocking identity is such a crucial step for the next phase, and I think that with the IAE is one of those steps. We're getting to the standard, getting to agreement where what should be using, and then that can apply and scale to so many devices. But I'll bring in Robert, because Robert, before Bright.AI, you have done some. You actually were, I believe, at Amazon as well as Samsung, and you have had so much experience. So the question for you would be, please share some experiences at Amazon and Samsung. Where are the major players are looking at it? Are they exploring it and thinking about it? Were there limitations Web 2.0 that Web 3 allows to solve?
So yeah, I'll reframe it, mostly talking about the last thing that you said, which is there are some challenges in Web 2.0, and actually they've been unsolved right from the beginning. One of the opportunities in Web 3.0 is because it can sit on the side, it can do a lot of what Anup is talking about. So it becomes another way to do many of these things, and then a better way. It can also leverage things from Web 2.0. So in order to sort of talk about that, I'm going to rewind to what are some of the big challenges in Web 2.0. So the first one, which is a little bit hinted at by Dr. Incredible, is that people who are producing devices decided, I really need kind of a service here, because one of the things that's different when you have this connected device, it generates a lot of data. And that data has gotten exponentially worse. Or depending on how you're looking at least the cost of that data has gotten exponentially greater over time. You can take something that would be one of the worst cases of that, as something like a television, which goes up to 8K now, and just say, oh my goodness, that's a lot of data. But even for something like a smoke detector, the amount of data that is moving around is huge. And it's a big problem for these people who were producing devices and had a business model, because the cost of both operating that device over time, making it operate reliably, which can be sort of updates, which were often not solved in Web 2.0, or all of this data. And then the second part of the data is, by the way, the only way data is useful is if it can be interoperable with other things. And so you had sets of companies, the larger ones, built these ecosystems so that you could do these things. And these ecosystems have started to evolve to the point where they're talking to each other at greater and greater levels. So right now, one of the newest things that's happening in this is a specification called Matter, which Amazon, Samsung, Apple, Google, all are deploying this year. And this allows you to address all these different devices. However, it doesn't really solve the problem, because if you have two rules that are fighting with each other, you have no way to resolve that. And in fact, no one's even quite sure if this is going to work to have you be part of, have a device be part of multiple fabrics. It's in the specification, but there is no proof point right now. Right now, any one of these devices will sit in a single fabric. And so we see an opportunity then to say, well, customers actually wanted a lot of this, especially with newer use cases like AI, where they want to control the data. But more than that, I just taking it back to the original business problem that was happening there, is that this data, to be useful, will travel through a number of vendors. Homes and businesses are multi-vendor by nature. They have so many different people participating because they're big, complex parts of the economy. And so this idea that, you know, a couple of companies in Web 2.0, the only solution they have is, be on my platform. You can connect to my platform through a set of APIs, doesn't scale to solve all of these problems. And then some of the new use cases, which is why you usually hear them associated with Web 3.0, which would be things like AR, VR, AI, anything that's data hungry, anything that's big and complicated. Yes, there are all those use cases, but actually it goes back to the basics. If I really want to create a system where I can participate in this way. Now, what's made this even more complicated, which has been hinted on by several of the commentators and is true, is regulatory and compliance landscape has changed dramatically over the past 2-3 years. And even we just take something simple like privacy. You know, right now, if you want to follow the regulations, and most devices are outside of the regulations in terms of privacy, you must be able to erase that customer data. I'm not even going to go to say, you know, what percentage of homes are out of compliance with today's regulation. But because of this, there are these strong things that really advocate for these use cases. And the thing that goes on top of all that is you sit there and go, wow, this is all this value you're trying to create. By the way, it doesn't really work as well as the old version either. Turn on a light bulb. It's instantaneous. Go the digital mechanism. It is very far from instantaneous. So, you know, a lot of companies are really happy if they get sub-second latency. That would be, you know, really successful. But that isn't what consumers want and need. And they needed to keep working over time, which meant you needed to update the device and do all of these things. So we look at it, we clearly need something that's better. And these technologies do solve some real world problems. I'll give you one example with blockchain is just sit there and go, hey, there's a lot of bad actors in the world. I really want to record all configuration changes in my devices in a way that, you know, can be shared and inspected, because basically I don't trust some of the people who might be able to make those changes, which is why something like identity in and of itself is not enough. Absolutely. You basically have a situation where you have to assume that these things are going to happen. Similarly, just taking another thing that's very simple is onboarding of these devices. Most of the onboarding of the devices are done through either a QR code or a PIN now that you have to see. Guess what? In the real world, people paint over those things and you're never going to see it again. And so basically, there are very few devices that support something more sophisticated in a secure way. because then, you know, a lot of people today, if you take on the standard way that people will do Wi-Fi onboarding, it is considered by security experts, sort of rightly, to have a number of flaws. And so you have that. Another example that's sort of like this, which is just the easiest one. Hey, you're going to onboard one of these devices. You want to pass Wi-Fi credentials. Big companies like Samsung and Amazon have lots of these Wi-Fi credentials, and they have mechanisms where you can get into a negotiation with them, get a business agreement, and maybe you'll be able to access it too if you meet the right criteria. That's not really fair. And it also doesn't fully scale. Now, it's helpful because they're, to be fair to these companies, they are trying to actually help people get these devices on. So don't take it as that criticism, just take it as a partial answer. And this is where it leads to Web 3.0. You sit there and say, wow, I want better solutions around these things that are as simple as just activating that device.
Yeah.
And
so, Robert, I'll have to, we get the next funnel coming up, so I want to make sure. But I think the point here is that there are a lot of problems, right? Like that currently Web3 helps solving. So that it's
basically say two things. One, there's that whole economic backbone of it, which is sort of the data and monetization of that data, and the fact that it is an existing economic problem that won't scale in the existing systems. And then the second one is, same with the reliability and efficacy, to use others' words, of your ability to do the basic things you needed to do with those devices are also challenged.
And do you think IoTeX can play a role in solving?
Well, of course. So this is where you sit there and say, and that's why I started it with, as creating a separate channel which can do this, it will become the most relevant channel. And this is where I agree with Anoop, is it's going to go through a few different iterations in the coming years. But what's going to happen is that this has to happen. And, I would use one example as that Matter specification I talked about, where vendors are starting to be able to interoperate between devices, but that won't be the solution. It will actually provide you with an ability, perhaps at the connectivity layer, to connect these devices. But then you will need things like the IoTeX platform in order to basically create something where you could actually operate in a scalable multi-vendor environment.
That's great. Yeah. So IoTeX platform as a kind of layer for scalability. Jing, and I want to move on to you. So this is everyone has been sitting, getting tech ready, but now we're going to talk about a little more fun, exciting things, opportunities in Web3. And what can we do? Web 2, Web 3, maybe paint us a picture, what's coming.
Yeah, I want to make it, more brief. As our panelists already shared, just like, what's a challenge faced, in the Web 2 or in our current status. I would say just like, when we're talking about, the opportunity, let's first take a look at, what the Web 3 is offering, to all the builders, to all the manufacturers, or the other, stakeholders. I would say there are three very important, kind of key pillar, or, the offering, which just like, right now Web 2 don't really have, and, Web 3 will kind of, help to unlock the innovation. The first part is, just like, we always have ambiguous kind of, who will be really the owner? I mean, just like, who is the owner of the identity or the device or the value generated by the devices? If we cannot really kind of set this clear, and then just like, the economic model basically cannot work, right? I would say the Web 3 here, just like, Anoop also mentioned, the Web 3 is about the ownership. Actually, just like, we kind of define, actually, we cannot only kind of read in the information, share the information, interact with information, but also as users, we can be the owner of the information. And in our cases, we can be the owner of the device and the value generated by the device. And if we can set this part clear through, the Web3 infrastructure, and then there are a lot of the opportunity is possible. And also it can kind of just like, actually just like free a lot of the participants in this industry. For example, we talk to hundreds of the manufacturers. Those are small, medium manufacturers. They not really have a kind of a high kind of garden wall. They don't really have a very big base of the devices as well as the users. But they have this, kind of trouble if they will take the responsibility for, all the account which user generated, but they have hosted them in their centralized server. if they will be the owner or responsible for the data, which kind of just like user can delegate, those manufacturers to kind of store their data, but they actually cannot really monetize on that part because, they are not ultimate user and they also don't really have the access. So that just like if we make it clear, hey, from the technical level, who is the owner? We give back the control and ownership to the user. That's a very important, key offering from the Web3, right? And the second part, we will say, we didn't touch a little, too much, which is the composability. So here, the composability, actually, Web 1 is starting from the open source. We were very open, and we were very kind of just like have a free, transparent world, so that it's easily to kind of just like for all those builders, they can not only innovate in their layer, but they can also compose their layers with other layers, which other creators, innovate, right? And so that make them together easily, they can do kind of combine them together. They are different modules. But right now, because of, those, giant companies, they kind of create this walled garden, and through the patents, through the IP, and then just basically, those big companies, they kind of take the control of all the valuable assets, including the data, users, traction, all those things. So this makes the innovators very difficult to really kind of just like create things and make it big. So that you will see when we're looking back, the AI, we already see a lot of the cases in the AI. We still have a lot of innovators. They have the best innovations in algorithm, all those things. It's very hard for them to create a model which can make them a kind of a viable business. And at the end, they have to be acquired by a big company because basically they don't have really can have those composability to of the setup to help them create a business and then scale, right? And then just like the Web3, the fundamental part is about the open source, composable kind of infrastructure, which means just that each creator, they can only focus on one layer, which they are really good at, then they can keep, building and innovate. At the same time, they can leverage on, they will have the access to all type of other layers, other protocols, components, or products. They can make them kind of just like the Lego, right? They can just like put them together and create new things. And this will unlock, such a huge kind of possibility for the innovations. Absolutely. And then the third part, the most important part, is embedded kind of value exchange layer. This layer in Web 2 is missing. Web 2 is kind of just like the internet layer and the payment or the incentive layer, they are kind of separate. But in the Web 3, actually it's kind of inherent. We have this, economic model. So this layer is super, important so that we can align everyone together. It could be the manufacturer, service provider, hardware, manufacturer. It could be just like the app, creators. It could be the users. All of them, they can just like coordinate each other. So the incentive model will define just like how we can align your contribution with the incentive. So each of them, they can play a role in this ecosystem, right? So they can contribute to certain things in the community, and then just like they can get certain things. So that here, when we are talking about the possibility and opportunity, they are basically, if we have this base, so that just like, the possibility is kind of, unlimited. In near term, I'm very bullish on just like this community-driven machine network. We never have that before, and now we can do that. Because, we clearly have the model say, hey, who is the owner? User is the owner. And then how to set up the machine network. Now we don't need to kind of rely on the hardware or the big player to help us bootstrap this, network. Actually, just like a community, they can set up, devices in their home, and then they can join a kind of, a machine network to contribute to their computing, or contribute to their maybe the proof of presence, the data, right? Or to contribute to maybe just like some other things, and then bootstrap this machine network. And for all the DApp, application player builders, they can just like create all type of the application, including the NFT and real world location based NFT. We have a lot of people. We have just a different innovators, they are already working on that type of the DApps, right?
Yeah.
And we have, the healthcare, we have the move to earn, we have the live to earn, house to earn, all those type of the, kind of creativity actually can happening on the chain side. I mean, just like for those innovators, they only work on that. And then just like for the other users, right, they can contribute their data, they can contribute their computing into the network, and then they can earn certain type of the tutor,
Absolutely.
asset. Yeah, this is a very high level. Actually, the possibility is endless.
And I kind of we're gonna move into the last question because we got. By the way, everyone, stick around. We got another panel coming up. Bigger, better, not really. We're all equal by panels, right? No fighting panels. All right, everybody gonna be safe. But the interesting thing is earlier, like as Jing mentioned, as actually Mitchell mentioned, healthcare. We actually have a healthblogs.ai. It's an app on Web3 being built on Web3, and there are, at IoTeX, they're being rolled out very soon. There's beta going on. So we're getting much closer than we think to possibilities. And the next year for 2022 is the next question for everyone is, what is the biggest opportunities that will arise from Web3 and how can IoTeX play a role in them? And also, what is your predictions for 2022, just kind of generally? So, how Web3 role, and maybe I'll start with Mitch, and we'll make our way up. And
all right.
Yeah.
Okay, just well, I'm no longer Dr. Incredible right now. I'm just Mitch Tseng. So this is actually a very interesting concept because we talk about Web 2 and Web 3, and then the focus, of course, is decentralization, right? Decentralization on that part. Then we're fortunate to have IoTeX as one of the active members in IIC. So definitely I'll receive a lot of input and also a lot of contributions from IoTeX and other members to talk about this. In the IoT, right? Although the term has an internet in it, it's actually mostly like an intranet. Right? We seldom see those, especially in the vertical domain, they really open up their network to internet. However, having that kind of architecture, I think like Mitchell and CTA also mentioned that we talk about this ecosystem. The term has been talking about that. But in IIC, we try to kind of like take advantage of this community because we know that we are working on the verticals. Everybody's very focused on things. And then so when we are next year, we're going to think about like focusing on community IoT economy, right? Remember the term I use, economy, mainly because I want to also kind of add a financial element into that one so that all the contributors in our domain can be well rewarded.
Absolutely.
In a very secure
I think, Mitch, just to be clear, and it's kind of and for everybody else is going to be just maybe one quick, 1 minute answer, just because so yeah, it's if you want to get any final words, Mitch, and your vision for 2022.
Well, we are looking forward to that. But on the other hand, let's watch the reactions from the big guys, because once we want to go to decentralization, then how will those major players in the Web 2 see about this? Would there be when they see the Web 3, do they see it as a friend or foe? That's something we need to also watch in 2022. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mitch. And Robert, maybe you could jump in next and tell us how do you see how IoTeX can play a role in it, and also your predictions for 2022, kind of brief one. Yeah.
So I'm going to actually move because a leaf blower has managed to move directly in front of me, right over to here. One of the dangers of the current work environment. So I think that one of the big challenges that we've talked about in 2022, which IoTeX can help a lot with, is proving out a couple of these use cases. So certainly health is one area. There are a lot of others. And with some of this proof, what this does is allow people to start to ante in. People then start to take some risk. The referenceability is key. And so this is something where it's really a call to the community, really a call more broadly to get involved now, to say, you can trust, like, this is not vaporware right now. We have ways to get started and do the concrete things. And then people will build on those. So we're just doing the Lego pieces that become the Lego kits that really become exciting. And I think that what we're going to see in 2022 is first real referenceability, because I think if you looked at anywhere in the press or anything that anyone's talked about, they will not say that there was anything really referenceable in 2021.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Thank you. And Michael Kaminsky, maybe you can say a few words on your vision, your future, and if you also in way see IoTeX potential to enter into this.
Yeah, no, first of all, I think this is really important conversation. So thank you to all for you all for hosting this. Jumping into that question, biggest opportunities. I think 2021 really was pretty monumental in terms of how communities form. And I think next year, especially pertaining to your work, I think that's going to extend. The next logical extension is being more creative and how Web3 can build, invest, and create different applications. So I think we're really just starting to scratch the surface. So I'm excited to see how communities actually will change these and invest in various items in terms of areas that I think that are I see in the autonomous vehicle space. There are lots of narratives in the media about lots of investment but not much progress. I actually think that is not only misleading but inaccurate. What we're seeing really is I think that AVs and specifically a few categories are going to take a major leap forward, especially in low-speed delivery, such as companies as Neuro, and then also on trucking with Aurora, and there's a whole host of companies there, I think, that are doing really interesting things, and I think it's going to be a major step next year. And then I'm personally very excited as a AR developer to see if Apple comes out with anything. There's obviously lots of opportunity there, and that's an area I would, if I'm building, I would certainly really be very excited about and focused on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mitchell. And Anoop, maybe you can enlighten what do you see how IoTeX fit into the puzzle and your vision for 2022.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think IoTeX is interestingly kind of in a sweet spot right now, right? If I look at the way that you guys are approaching what you do and how you do it, I think IoTeX is very unique, right? And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and I think the ecosystem will reward itself and the broader community that's around that ecosystem, because ecosystems are not in isolation, right? So there's a lot of upside, not just from a monetary perspective, but even just like actually advancing the state of the art. So really excited about that. My prediction for 2022 is we're going to see, what we're seeing right now in 2021 is art and culture pushing the boundaries of business models. And we're going to see that really accelerate in 2022. And we're going to see that evolve into an environment where, it's not simply a digital and online experience, right? These digital online experiences will extend into reality, into real life. So, it's not just going to be VR and an online game that you're playing. It's going to be, an immersive experience in AR. And we're going to see some really interesting infrastructure changes as a result, right? The amount of bandwidth that is going to be required to deliver these experiences is going to be really, really important to get a grasp on. Not to mention the volume of value flow that's going to be created as a result. Lots of experimentation, but I think that's the direction that we're going in.
That's the name of the game. Absolutely, a lot of experimentation, and the field is, as Anoop said, is ripe for growth. Jing, last but not the least, please take us off on your, how you see IoTeX going during 2022 and your vision for the year as well.
Yeah, I will make it short. Actually, I think the biggest trend is the transition of Web3 already started. We already see this transition started from the other, industry, like, the finance, the DeFi, they grow to 200 billion within 2 years. And, the transition from the game and, the collectible and also social space, 3 sectors actually they grow kind of 100 billion, within 1 year. This year, actually, we see kind of just like this is a start, and when I will say just like 2022 will be a critical year, for the entire kind of IoT machine, industry, because this will be the first year we will see the first batch of those, machine file use cases. They will show to the market and start to get the, just like the users. So that I will say, the big things will be, definitely this will be the first batch, but we will see the new models, happening in this industry as well, and we will see the transition will be happening in all industries, just like in all the Web2 kind of verticals. And here the big part is, the proved model in the digital space, for the other industry already gave, the IoT companies such a big kind of, models. And so that's just like, here, what the extension here is how we kind of connect, the physical world into the Web3. I think just like this will kind of unlock, huge kind of possibility, which is even impossible right now in the Web3. And this is the missing part. And I would say, I'm very excited to see, actually, because we already see the builders are building things. It's just like the timing for them to launch the product in 2022. So that's to me, that's the most important part. Yeah, the MachineFi, how the MachineFi, the first batch of those experiments, right, can show to, the industry, the new models to unlock the value.